My name is Diane, and I am 66 years old. As a retired estate planner, I built my career ensuring clients' legacies were honored, their wills executed with absolute precision. For 8 long years, I meticulously cared for my aging mother, sacrificing my own retirement dreams to ensure her comfort and dignity. I helped her craft a clear, legally binding will that reflected her deepest wishes. I believed in legal clarity, familial honesty, and the unwavering integrity of family bonds. These weren't just professional principles, they were the foundation of who I was. Just weeks after Mom's funeral, my world collapsed. My Aunt Carol, with a chilling calm that still haunts me, brazenly claimed Mom had promised her the entire estate, the family home, $250,000 in cash to cover her $300,000 debt. My son Mark immediately fell under Carol's spell, screaming at me with venom I'd never heard before. "Mom, she's lying. You're a fool. You have no humanity." His wife Brenda called me pathetic. My integrity, my mother's sacred legacy, my family all shattered in an instant. I felt profoundly alone, caught between defending truth and my son's shocking greed. Yet as despair threatened to consume me, something awakened. The estate planner's unwavering drive for justice ignited a cold fury within me. What Carol, Mark, Brenda, and their aggressive lawyer, Mr. Davies, didn't know was my secret weapon meticulously maintained estate files, Mom's original will, and journals documenting her explicit refusals of Carol's past financial demands. Crucial emails from Mom's financial advisor detailed Carol's persistent, desperate attempts to extract money from her. My retired Supreme Court Justice ally waited in the wings. This time, their insidious fraud wouldn't just unravel, it would expose their shocking lack of humanity, protect Mom's true legacy, and redefine what family really means. But the cost would be agonizing. The confrontation began 3 days after Carol's outrageous claim. I drove to Mom's house, the house where I'd spent countless hours caring for her, where every room held memories of our shared laughter and tears. Carol was already there, going through Mom's belongings with the casual entitlement of an owner. My children, Mark and Lisa, had arrived before me, their faces flushed with anger that I thought was directed at Carol's audacity. How wrong I was. "Diane," Carol began, her voice dripping with false hurt. "I know this is difficult for you to accept, but your mother made her wishes very clear to me. She saw my struggles, my desperate situation. She knew about my $300,000 debt, about the $50,000 I owe to that loan shark who's been threatening my life. She promised me this house, the cash, everything. She said family takes care of family." I felt my chest tighten. "Carol, that's impossible. Mom's will is crystal clear. She wanted everything divided equally among Mom." Mark's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Stop being so naive. Aunt Carol is telling the truth. You're the one who's lying here." The room spun around me. "Mark, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you're a fraud," he shouted, his face twisted with rage I'd never seen before. "You manipulated Grandma when she was weak. You changed her will to benefit yourself. Aunt Carol has been honest with us from the beginning." "Lisa," my daughter stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Mom, please. We need this inheritance for our futures. Carol's situation is desperate. You can't let your selfishness blind you to what's right." But it was Brenda, Mark's wife, who delivered the cruelest blow. "Honestly, Diane, your sentimental attachment to some outdated will is costing us a fortune. You're a complete fool. This cash would solve all of Mark's $150,000 in credit card debt, but you're too greedy to see beyond your own interests." Even my grandson, Ethan, barely 18, looked at me with disgust. "Grandma, why are you being so greedy? Aunt Carol needs the money more than you do." I staggered backward, my hand gripping the doorframe for support. These were my children, my grandson, the people I'd loved and sacrificed for my entire life. And they were standing there united against me, calling me a liar, a fraud, a greedy old woman. Carol watched it all with calculated satisfaction. "I'm so sorry it has to be this way, Diane, but I won't let you destroy what your mother truly wanted. I've already spoken to Mr. Davies, my lawyer. He's prepared to take legal action if you continue to interfere with Mom's final wishes." The threatening letters began arriving within days. Mr. Davies, an aggressive attorney with a reputation for ruthless tactics, sent formal demands for me to cease all interference with Carol's rightful inheritance. The letters implied that legal action would be swift and severe if I didn't comply immediately. Mark and Brenda began circulating rumors throughout our extended family. They painted me as a bitter, controlling woman who had manipulated her dying mother for personal gain. They shared fabricated stories about my hoarding Mom's assets, about my mental instability in the wake of her death. "She's lost her mind," Brenda told anyone who would listen. "She's so desperate to control everything that she's making up lies about Carol. It's actually quite sad." The isolation was suffocating. Family members who had known me for decades began avoiding my calls. At the grocery store, I caught whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. My integrity, built over 66 years of honest living, was being systematically destroyed by people I had trusted with my life. But the worst part wasn't the public humiliation. It was the private moments when I lay awake at night, wondering if somehow, impossibly, I had misunderstood Mom's wishes. Had I been so focused on legal documents that I'd missed her true intentions? The doubt gnawed at me like a cancer, even though every fiber of my professional experience told me Carol was lying. Carol's desperation became more apparent as the days passed. She started flaunting small amounts of cash around town, hinting that she was already receiving her inheritance. She made veiled threats about what would happen to me if I continued to stand in the way of justice. "Diane," she said during one particularly tense phone call, "you're making this much harder than it needs to be. Mom wanted me to have this. Fighting it will only bring more pain to everyone involved." The pressure from my own family intensified. Mark and Brenda brought me legal documents to sign, demanding I transfer all rights to the estate immediately. They researched lawyers, made appointments, and pressured me relentlessly to sue Carol for the truth. Except their version of the truth was that I should give her everything. "Mom, you're being ridiculous," Mark said during one particularly heated argument. "Just sign the papers and end this nightmare. We need this money, and Aunt Carol deserves it. Stop being so stubborn." As I sat alone in my small apartment that night, surrounded by the few possessions I'd managed to save from my mother's house, I felt the weight of complete betrayal settling over me like a shroud. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the pain and confusion, a small flame of determination still flickered. I was an estate planner. I knew the law. I knew the truth. And I would not let them destroy my mother's legacy without a fight. Carol's boldness grew with each passing day. Emboldened by my family's support and my apparent hesitation, she made increasingly outrageous claims. She announced publicly that she intended to claim not just the house and cash, but also Mom's precious antique furniture collection pieces worth over $150,000 that had been in our family for generations. These were promised gifts, she declared to anyone who would listen. Diane's mother knew I appreciated beautiful things, knew I would treasure these pieces as she did. Mr. Davies, her aggressive lawyer, escalated his tactics. The threatening letters became more frequent and more menacing. He demanded I cease all interference with Carol's rightful inheritance and implied that criminal charges might be filed against me for elder abuse and undue influence over my mother. Mrs. Diane, one letter read, "Your continued harassment of my client will result in immediate legal action. We have substantial evidence of your manipulation of the deceased's final wishes. Cease all contact immediately or face the full consequences of the law." Mark and Brenda actively supported these threats, spreading rumors throughout our community about my stubbornness and disregard for Mom's true wishes. They painted themselves as the reasonable voices, trying to honor an elderly woman's final desires while dealing with a bitter, controlling daughter. "It's so sad," Brenda told our neighbors. "Diane just can't accept that her mother had different priorities than she thought. She's making this whole situation so much more painful than it needs to be." But then I discovered something that chilled me to the bone. While going through some financial records, I found a receipt that made my blood run cold. Carol had already sold one of Mom's antique pieces, a beautiful 19th century mantel clock worth $5,000, to a local dealer. She was brazenly converting Mom's assets to cash, openly flaunting her new funds around town. When I confronted her about this, her response was shockingly callous. "Diane, that clock was specifically promised to me. I have every right to do what I need to do with my own property. Your mother understood my situation." In that moment, I realized with chilling clarity that Carol's desperation had completely overridden any moral compass she might have once possessed. She was fully prepared to dismantle my mother's legacy, piece by piece, for her own gain, and she felt absolutely no shame about it. The discovery brought back a flood of painful memories of a decades-old secret I had kept to protect Carol, a secret that now made her current betrayal unbearably ironic. 15 years earlier, Carol had faced a crippling personal crisis. Her gambling addiction had spiraled out of control, leaving her $80,000 in debt. Worse, she had been arrested for embezzling money from the local charity where she volunteered desperately, trying to cover her gambling losses. The scandal threatened to destroy her completely criminal charges, public disgrace, the loss of her family's respect. Carol had come to me in tears, begging for help. "Diane, I'll lose everything. My husband, my kids, my entire life. Please, you're the only one who can help me." I had made the most difficult decision of my life. Using my skills as an estate planner and my own personal savings, over $60,000, I had secretly paid off Carol's debts. More than that, I had meticulously fabricated documents and coached her through a complex legal strategy that shifted blame to a disgruntled former employee at the charity. I had saved her from criminal charges and public disgrace. I had kept this colossal sacrifice hidden from everyone, including my own mother. I believed I had saved Carol's life, that my extraordinary act of love and loyalty had given her a second chance at happiness and redemption. Now, as she systematically destroyed my mother's legacy and turned my own children against me, the irony was unbearable. The woman I had sacrificed everything to protect was repaying my love with the cruelest betrayal imaginable. When I tried to subtly allude to my past sacrifices for her, hoping to awaken some sense of gratitude or conscience, Carol's response was swift and brutal. "Diane, you're always trying to play the hero," she snapped. "Your past choices are your own business. Mr. Davies says you're trying to manipulate me with old stories to avoid facing the truth about your mother's wishes." Mark reinforced her cruelty with his own cutting words. "Mom, Aunt Carol's right. You're trying to play the victim now. Just accept reality and do what's right for all of us. Brenda took the humiliation public posting on social media. Some people just can't accept reality. It's sad when family members try to twist the truth for personal gain. Moving forward from negativity and desperate attempts at manipulation. But Mr. Davies delivered the ultimate insult. He formally proposed a settlement meeting where his generous solution would be for me to immediately transfer $100,000 in savings and the entire antique furniture collection to Carol. In return, Carol would graciously agree to a public statement promoting family harmony and respect for the deceased's wishes. It was extortion, dressed up as compassion, designed to silence me completely and legitimize Carol's fraud under a veneer of keeping the peace. As I sat in my quiet apartment that night, surrounded by the few photographs and mementos I had managed to save, I felt the full weight of Carol's betrayal settling over me. The woman I had sacrificed everything to protect was now systematically destroying everything I held sacred. But alongside the crushing pain, something else was growing, a cold, righteous anger that burned brighter with each passing day. I was not just Diane, the betrayed sister-in-law. I was Diane, the estate planner, the woman who had spent her career protecting families from exactly this kind of fraud. And I had weapons they didn't know about. The final blow came on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. I was having my usual quiet breakfast when the doorbell rang. A process server stood on my doorstep holding an envelope that would change everything. Inside was a temporary restraining order filed by Mark, Lisa, and Brenda. The legal document, crafted by Mr. Davies with ruthless precision, was based on fabricated claims of harassment and erratic behavior related to the inheritance dispute. According to the order, I was now legally banned from coming within 500 feet of Mark, Lisa, Brenda, or even my own mother's grave. The accusations were devastating. Defendant has engaged in a pattern of harassment, including unwanted contact, emotional manipulation, and threats related to the deceased's estate. Defendant's behavior has become increasingly erratic and concerning, necessitating legal protection for the petitioners. It was all lies, but it was legal. I was now in the eyes of the law a criminal if I attempted any contact with my own children. The public humiliation was immediate and complete. News of the restraining order spread through our small community like wildfire. Neighbors who had known me for decades looked at me with suspicion and fear. I was now the unstable old woman who had threatened her own family. But I couldn't give up. Not yet. In a moment of desperate hope, I decided to make one final appeal to whatever love might still exist in my children's hearts. I spent hours carefully assembling a small photo album filled with our most cherished memories. Mark's first steps, Lisa's graduation family holidays at Mom's house, moments of pure joy and love that had once defined our family. I wrote a heartfelt letter to accompany the album, pouring my soul onto paper. My dearest children, I know you're hurt and confused right now. I know you believe I've betrayed you somehow, but please remember who we used to be. Remember the love we shared. Remember the values Mom taught us about truth and family. I love you both more than my own life, and I always will, no matter what happens. I left the album anonymously on Mark's doorstep, praying it might soften his heart, might remind him of the mother who had loved him unconditionally for 34 years. 3 days later, I saw Brenda's social media post. It was a photograph of my carefully crafted album, but it had been torn apart and cut into pieces. The precious photos I had lovingly selected were scattered and destroyed. The caption read, "Cleaning out the clutter. Some people just can't let go of the past. Moving forward from negativity and desperate attempts to manipulate." In that moment, my heart didn't just break, it shattered beyond any possibility of repair. The realization that my own son had actively participated in this ultimate act of erasure, had watched his wife destroy irreplaceable memories of our life together, confirmed the absolute finality of their betrayal. These weren't just photographs. They were the physical embodiment of 34 years of motherhood, of love, of sacrifice, of joy. And they had been destroyed as casually as yesterday's garbage. Carol's response was swift and merciless. A brief text message arrived that same evening. "Consider this closed, Diane. You tried. You lose. Don't contact me or my family again, ever. You're crazy if you think you can win this." Brenda escalated her public campaign, calling mutual acquaintances to spread rumors about my mental instability and dangerous obsession with money. She painted me as a deranged, bitter old woman who posed a threat to her own family. But it was Mark's final message that delivered the killing blow. A text arrived at 2 a.m. "Mom, you're crazy. Why don't you just die already?" Those words from my son, my firstborn, the child I had carried for 9 months, nursed through countless illnesses, cheered through every triumph, cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. In the depths of my despair, I found myself confiding in Sarah, a compassionate family mediator who had become my only remaining ally. And in that moment of complete vulnerability, I revealed the most guarded secret of my past. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice breaking, "there's something I never told anyone. Something that makes all of this so much worse." I told her about the hidden video my mother had recorded just months before her death, an informal testament made on her old camcorder, not legally admissible, but emotionally devastating. In that recording, Mom had looked directly into the camera and spoken with crystal clarity about her final wishes. "I want everyone to know," she had said, "that I love Carol dearly, but I cannot and will not give her any special consideration in my will. She has made poor financial decisions throughout her life, and I will not reward that behavior by giving her more than her fair share. Diane has been my faithful daughter, caring for me with such devotion. I trust her completely to ensure my wishes are honored equally for all my grandchildren." The video had been Mom's insurance policy, her way of ensuring that her true wishes would be known if anyone ever tried to distort them. She had made me promise to keep it secret unless it became absolutely necessary to protect her legacy. Now, as Carol systematically destroyed everything Mom had worked for, as my own children called me a liar and a fraud, the existence of that video felt like a cosmic joke. I had the proof of my mother's true intentions, but revealing it would mean breaking a sacred promise to a dying woman. The irony was unbearable. My deepest filial devotion had become the weapon of my own destruction. As I sat alone in my apartment that night, surrounded by the silence of complete abandonment, I realized that my choice was no longer about money or inheritance or even family loyalty. It was about something far more fundamental, the difference between truth and lies, between justice and fraud, between the legacy of a good woman and the greed of those who would destroy it. I was 66 years old alone and branded as a criminal by my own children. But I was also an estate planner who had spent her career protecting families from exactly this kind of betrayal. And I still had weapons they didn't know about. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The days following Mark's devastating text message blurred together in a haze of psychological torment. I found myself trapped in a terrifying abyss of isolation, carrying the monumental weight of my mother's true final wishes while watching Carol's relentless pursuit of fraud destroy everything sacred in our family. The revelation that my own children had chosen greed and lies over my integrity turned every memory of our past into a source of constant anguish. Had I failed as a mother? Had I somehow taught them that love was conditional, that family meant nothing when money was involved? My professional identity as an ethical estate planner crumbled under the weight of their accusations. For 40 years, I had built my reputation on meticulous accuracy and unwavering integrity. Now, every document I'd ever prepared, every family I'd helped protect, felt meaningless. If I couldn't even protect my own mother's legacy, what kind of estate planner had I really been? The psychological assault escalated when Carol and Mr. Davies launched a calculated campaign to destroy what remained of my professional reputation. They began subtly leaking details of my erratic behavior to estate planning associations and trust officer networks throughout the state. Phone calls were made, emails sent, all implying that I was experiencing cognitive decline and harboring unstable fantasies about ethical probate practices. "We're concerned about Mrs. Diane's recent behavior," Mr. Davies would say in carefully worded conversations with my former colleagues. "Her family has noticed increasing confusion and paranoid delusions about inheritance fraud. It's quite sad, really. Age can be so cruel to even the most competent professionals." The impact was swift and devastating. Within weeks, I received quiet cancellations from professional bodies I'd belonged to for decades. Invitations to financial planning seminars were withdrawn. Former colleagues who had once sought my advice stopped returning my calls. The whispered conversations at the grocery store now extended to professional circles where my reputation had once been unassailable. I was being systematically erased from the legal community I'd served with distinction for 4 decades. The financial consequences were equally catastrophic. The escalating legal fees from defending myself against Carol's fraudulent claims, combined with the costs of fighting the restraining order, completely drained my savings. My bank accounts were frozen pending resolution of the estate dispute. The modest retirement income I'd carefully planned for was cut off when professional associations revoked their pension contributions, citing ethical concerns about my past conduct. Within 2 months, I was forcibly evicted from my cherished home, the place where I'd raised my children, where every room held memories of better times. I watched helplessly as my remaining possessions were sold at a public auction to cover mounting debts. 40 years of careful living, of building a stable foundation for my golden years gone in an afternoon of court-ordered liquidation. I was rendered homeless, stripped of my dignity and self-reliance, forced to seek shelter in a crowded, impersonal public facility where I shared a room with 3 other displaced women. The irony was crushing. I, who had spent my career helping families preserve their legacies, was now sleeping on a thin mattress in a shelter, my own legacy destroyed by the very people I'd sacrificed everything to protect. But the cruelest blow was yet to come. Mark and Lisa orchestrated what they called a family legacy charity event, an inheritance counseling group designed to help families navigate complex estate issues. The publicity photos showed my children and grandchildren smiling warmly as they promoted healthy family communication and ethical inheritance practices. Ethan, now 16 and tall like his father, stood at a podium delivering a rehearsed speech about honoring true wishes and avoiding the destructive influence of greedy relatives who can't accept reality. Every word was carefully crafted to paint me as the cautionary tale, the bitter old woman whose selfishness had torn apart a loving family. "Sometimes," Ethan said, his young voice carrying across the crowded community center, family members become so focused on what they think they deserve that they lose sight of what really matters: love, understanding, and respect for the departed's actual intentions. The audience nodded knowingly, many of them recognizing the subtle reference to my situation. I watched the live stream from a computer at the public library, my hands shaking, as I witnessed my beloved grandson being used as a weapon against me. But it was Chloe's contribution that shattered what remained of my heart. My 14-year-old granddaughter, the little girl who used to braid my hair and ask me to read her bedtime stories, had created a drawing for the event. It showed a happy family gathered around a dinner table, smiling and holding hands. I wasn't in the picture. Where I should have been there was simply empty space, as if I had never existed at all. The drawing was displayed prominently behind the speakers, a visual representation of my complete erasure from their lives. In my deepest despair, contemplating whether it might be easier to simply give up and disappear completely, an unexpected lifeline appeared. Mrs. Eleanor Richardson, a wealthy widow I had helped navigate a complex inheritance battle 20 years earlier, reached out to me after seeing news coverage of my plight. "Diane," she said during our emotional phone call, "I remember what you did for my family when my husband's brother tried to steal our estate. You saved us from financial ruin and kept our family together. I've never forgotten your integrity, your compassion, your unwavering commitment to truth." Mrs. Richardson didn't just offer kind words, she provided crucial financial support to help me continue the legal battle. More importantly, she connected me with a network of retired legal professionals who specialized in elder fraud and inheritance disputes. These seasoned attorneys and forensic accountants had seen cases like mine before and recognized the sophisticated patterns of manipulation and legal abuse. "This isn't just about money," explained Judge Patricia Morrison, a retired family court judge who agreed to consult on my case. "This is about a systematic campaign to discredit and destroy you. We've seen it before, and we know how to fight it." For the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: hope. Not the naive hope of reconciliation with my children, but the fierce, determined hope of a woman who still had fight left in her. I was 66 years old, homeless, and branded as mentally unstable by my own family. But I was also an estate planner with 40 years of experience, and I now had allies who understood exactly what Carol and my children were doing to me. The war was far from over, and I was finally ready to fight back. 3 months after the restraining order destroyed my life, Carol orchestrated the ultimate insult, a highly publicized family heritage auction that would forever change how I viewed human greed and manipulation. Using Mark's social standing in the community and Mr. Davies's legal connections, Carol promoted the event as a touching tribute to my mother's memory. She claimed to be honoring Mom's legacy while helping a family member in crisis, presenting herself as the dutiful daughter who truly understood my mother's generous spirit. The truth was far more sinister. Carol was systematically liquidating my mother's most cherished possessions, antique furniture, worth over $150,000, family heirlooms that had been passed down for generations, and sentimental items that held irreplaceable memories. She treated these sacred objects as mere commodities, pricing them for quick sale to maximize her cash flow. The auction was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at the community center, the same venue where my grandchildren had publicly disavowed me months earlier. Local newspapers ran feature stories about the event, praising Carol's selfless dedication to family and her practical approach to honoring the deceased. I learned about the auction from Margaret, a former colleague who called me at the shelter with barely contained outrage. Diane, you need to know what they're doing. They're selling your mother's things, and they're making it sound like you're the villain for trying to stop them. I made my way to the public library and found the live stream on one of their computers. What I witnessed there will haunt me for the rest of my life. Carol stood at the front of the crowded room, wearing my mother's pearl necklace, a piece that was supposed to be mine, according to Mom's explicit wishes. She spoke with practiced emotion about her beloved aunt and the important lesson this auction represented about putting family needs above material attachments. My aunt was a generous woman who understood that love means action, not just words, Carol told the rapt audience. She saw my struggles, my desperate financial situation, and she wanted to help. Some people in our family can't accept that generosity, but I'm determined to honor her true wishes, even if it means making difficult decisions. The crowd murmured sympathetically, many nodding in agreement, as Carol painted herself as the selfless hero, and me as the greedy obstacle to familial harmony. Brenda stepped forward to give a testimonial that made my stomach turn. I've watched Carol struggle with this decision for months, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. It would be so much easier to just keep these beautiful things, but she knows that helping family in crisis is more important than holding on to material possessions. That's what real love looks like. I watched powerless and hidden as my mother's mahogany dining set, where we'd shared countless family meals, where I'd helped my children with homework, where Mom had taught me her secret recipes, was sold to strangers for a fraction of its worth. Each piece that disappeared represented another memory stolen, another connection to my family's history severed forever. But the worst was yet to come. Ethan appeared in a pre-recorded video shown on a large screen above the auction tables. My 16-year-old grandson, the boy I'd once rocked to sleep and taken to baseball games, looked directly into the camera with coach sincerity. I've learned so much about what really matters in family, he said, his voice steady and mature beyond his years. Sometimes we get too attached to old things, to outdated ideas about how inheritance should work. My great-grandmother would want us to focus on helping each other, not fighting over furniture and books. The camera panned to show some of my mother's estate planning textbooks, the professional guides that had helped me build my career and serve families for 40 years. Ethan gestured toward them dismissively. These old books represent a different time when people were more rigid about rules and less focused on compassion. We prefer solutions that actually help people in need, not theoretical legal principles that ignore human suffering. I felt physically ill, watching my grandson speak words that had clearly been written by adults, words designed to make my professional expertise sound cold and outdated. Every sentence was a calculated attack on my credibility and my character. Then Chloe appeared on screen, my 14-year-old granddaughter, giggling as she held up one of my mother's law books. Grandma used to read stuff like this all the time, so boring and old-fashioned. We think helping Aunt Carol with real money is way better than keeping dusty old books that nobody reads anymore. Her laughter felt like glass cutting through my heart. This was the little girl who used to sit in my lap while I read to her, who had once been fascinated by my important grown-up books and said she wanted to be a lawyer when she grew up. Now she was mocking everything I'd worked for, everything my mother had valued, as if our family's commitment to justice and integrity was nothing more than an amusing relic. The auction raised over $200,000 money that Carol immediately used to pay down her debts and finance a more comfortable lifestyle. She thanked the community for their understanding and support in helping her honor her aunt's true charitable spirit. I sat in that library chair for hours after the live stream ended, feeling as though I'd witnessed the public execution of my mother's memory. Everything she had worked for, everything she had saved and cherished, had been reduced to cash in a single afternoon. Her values of fairness, integrity, and family unity had been twisted into a justification for greed and fraud. But then something unexpected happened. Mr. Harrison Blackwell, a respected philanthropist who had been one of my clients 15 years earlier, was watching the auction from his home. He recognized some of the pieces being sold antiques he had helped my mother acquire through estate sales items that held specific historical significance and far greater value than Carol was claiming. More importantly, he remembered my character, my unwavering commitment to ethical practice, and my deep love for my family. The casual dismissal of my mother's intellectual legacy, the cold efficiency with which her possessions were liquidated, disgusted him. Mr. Blackwell discreetly contacted Judge Morrison, the retired Supreme Court Justice, who had joined my legal team. He offered not just financial support, but something far more valuable, a professional affidavit vouching for my impeccable ethical judgment and mental acuity. His reputation in the community was unassailable, and his word carried the weight of decades of successful business relationships. I've known Diane professionally for over 20 years, his affidavit stated. She is one of the most ethical, competent, and mentally sharp individuals I've ever encountered. The suggestion that she is experiencing cognitive decline or acting from greed is not just wrong, it's malicious. This woman deserves justice, not persecution. As I walked back to the shelter that evening, carrying Mr. Blackwell's affidavit in my worn purse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. It wasn't hope not yet, but it was determination. The fire that had made me a successful estate planner for 40 years was beginning to burn again. Carol had won this battle liquidating my mother's legacy for her personal gain, but she had also made a crucial mistake. In her greed and arrogance, she had created a public record of her actions, a documented trail of fraud and manipulation that could be used against her. My mother's possessions were gone forever, but her fight for truth was just beginning. The final assault on my life came swiftly and with surgical precision. Carol, emboldened by her auction success and working closely with Mr. Davies, and my son Mark, launched what can only be described as total financial warfare designed to erase me completely from existence. The attack began with a lawsuit that arrived on a Tuesday morning in November. Carol's cousin George, who had remained quietly supportive of her fraud, until now filed a devastating legal action against me for $750,000. The charges were as creative as they were malicious emotional distress, defamation of character, and intentional interference with family harmony. According to the suit, my harassment of Carol and my false claims about the inheritance had caused George severe psychological trauma and damaged his reputation in the community. The lawsuit alleged that my unstable behavior and paranoid accusations had created a hostile family environment that threatened his mental health and business relationships. The legal fees alone would have bankrupted me if I'd had anything left to lose. But George and Mr. Davies had a more insidious plan. While I struggled to find legal representation, I could afford they launched a coordinated attack on my remaining financial resources. George contacted my former estate planning associations and retirement fund administrators with concerns about my mental competence and erratic behavior. He claimed that my family was worried about my ability to manage my own finances and suggested that I was unfit to receive professional pension benefits. We're deeply concerned about Diane's recent deterioration, he told the pension board with practiced sincerity. Her behavior has become increasingly erratic and paranoid. She's making wild accusations about family members, filing frivolous legal claims, and showing clear signs of cognitive decline. We feel it would be irresponsible to continue providing financial benefits to someone who clearly cannot manage them appropriately. The bureaucratic machinery moved with frightening efficiency. Within weeks, my estate planner pension was permanently revoked, along with any professional honors I had earned over 4 decades of service. The official letter cited gross misconduct related to past cases and current concerns about mental fitness, effectively branding me as a fraud and a danger to the profession I had served with distinction. I was now completely destitute with no income, no savings, no home, and mounting legal debts that grew larger every day. The forced eviction from my temporary shelter accommodation was deliberately timed for maximum humiliation. Brenda had been monitoring my living situation through her network of social media connections, and she ensured that local news cameras would be present when I was removed from the building. The footage was devastating. A 66-year-old woman carrying her few remaining possessions in garbage bags, looking confused and defeated as she stood on the sidewalk with nowhere to go. The news story painted me as a cautionary tale about the dangers of family conflict and the tragic consequences of refusing to accept reality. Former estate planner loses everything in inheritance dispute, the headline read. Family members say she refused help and chose conflict over compromise. Mark and Lisa maintained their chilling indifference throughout my public disgrace. When asked for comment by reporters, Mark issued a brief statement. My mother made her choices. I have no legal or moral obligation to support someone who has chosen conflict over family harmony. She created this situation, and she must face the consequences. Lisa posted on social media about her busy schedule and exciting new projects, subtly implying that she was too focused on positive things to get involved in the drama surrounding me. They avoided any eye contact when they occasionally saw me around town, looking through me as if I were a stranger rather than the woman who had given them life and devoted 34 years to their happiness. But it was Brenda who delivered the cruelest twist of the knife. Using funds that she and Mark had received from my mother's unclaimed inheritance money that rightfully belonged to me and my grandchildren, she purchased a luxury art studio for Ethan's 17th birthday. The custom-built space cost over $100,000 and was designed for his artistic development and college preparation. The dedication ceremony was publicized throughout the community, with Brenda giving interviews about the importance of investing in young people's futures and using inheritance money responsibly for the next generation. She made sure photographers captured every angle of the beautiful space with its professional lighting, expensive equipment, and inspirational quotes painted on the walls. This is what Mark's grandmother would have wanted, Brenda told the local newspaper. She believed in education and helping young people achieve their dreams. This studio represents her values far better than keeping money tied up in legal disputes or dwelling on the past. The photos were shared widely on social media with captions about family values and turning inheritance into opportunity. Every image was a brutal reminder that my mother's hard-earned money was being used to create beautiful spaces for grandchildren who had publicly disowned me while I slept on a cot in a homeless shelter. The relentless psychological and financial siege finally broke my body. On a cold December morning, I collapsed while walking to a job interview at a local grocery store. The stress-induced heart attack was severe, and I was rushed to the emergency room with my life hanging by a thread. I lay unconscious for 3 days, my body finally surrendering to the overwhelming pressure that had been building for months. The nurses told me later that I had been alone. No family members came to visit. No one called to check on my condition. I was simply another indigent patient in the charity ward, forgotten and abandoned. But during those dark hours of unconsciousness, something remarkable happened. In the depths of my medical crisis, buried memories began to surface, fragments of conversations with my mother that I had suppressed or forgotten in the chaos of recent events. I remembered a specific conversation from 2 years before Mom's death, when she had confided her fears about Carol's financial irresponsibility and George's history of questionable business dealings. She had spoken quietly, almost whispering, about her deliberate decision to structure her will in a way that would prevent any of them from exploiting her legacy. "Diane," she had said, gripping my hand with surprising strength, "I know they'll try to take everything when I'm gone. Carol has always been weak when it comes to money, and George has those gambling debts. I've made sure my will is clear, but I'm counting on you to protect what I've worked for. Promise me you won't let them twist my words or change my intentions." I had promised, thinking it was just an elderly woman's paranoia about family dynamics. Now I realized it had been a prophetic warning about exactly what was happening to me. As I lay in that hospital bed, barely alive and completely alone, I felt something rekindle deep inside me, not just the memory of my promise to Mom, but the fierce determination that had made me a successful estate planner for 40 years. They had taken my home, my money, my family, and nearly my life, but they hadn't taken my knowledge, my experience, or my commitment to truth. I was 66 years old, homeless, and branded as mentally unstable by my own children. But I was also a woman who understood exactly how inheritance fraud worked, and I now had nothing left to lose. The final battle was about to begin. Recovery from my heart attack was slow and painful, but it gave me time to think clearly for the first time in months. The recovered memories of my mother's explicit warnings about Carol and George had crystallized into a plan. I would make one final attempt to reach my son's conscience, to break through the web of lies and manipulation that had consumed my family. With the help of Sarah, my compassionate nurse who had become my only ally in the hospital, I managed to record a video message from my hospital bed. Despite my weakness and the obvious toll the recent months had taken on my appearance, I spoke with the clarity and conviction that had once made me a respected estate planner. In the 15-minute recording, I detailed everything: Carol's systematic fraud, George's hidden gambling debts, Brenda's calculated manipulation, and the sophisticated legal campaign designed to destroy my credibility. Most importantly, I played audio recordings I had made months earlier, conversations where Carol had privately admitted her desperate financial situation and her willingness to do whatever it takes to claim the inheritance. "Mark," I said, looking directly into the camera with all the love a mother could convey, "I know you're hurt and confused. I know they've convinced you that I'm the enemy, but please just listen to your mother one more time. Listen to Carol's own words, her own admissions of fraud. Remember the woman who raised you, who taught you right from wrong. Remember what your grandmother really wanted." I also gently referenced Mark's own financial struggles, the credit card debt that had made him vulnerable to Brenda's promises of easy money, hoping to awaken some recognition of how he had been manipulated into betraying his own values. The video was my last desperate plea, containing everything I had been unable to say because of the restraining order. It was raw, emotional, and absolutely truthful. Sarah promised to deliver it directly to Mark's workplace, ensuring he would see it before anyone else could interfere. But we underestimated Brenda's surveillance network. Within hours of Sarah's departure from Mark's office, I received a call that changed everything. Brenda had been monitoring my activities through contacts she had cultivated among the hospital staff employees she had befriended and occasionally tipped for information about my condition and visitors. She had intercepted Sarah at Mark's workplace, convincing her that she was concerned about Mark's emotional state and offering to preview the message to ensure it wouldn't cause him additional stress. Sarah, exhausted from her long shifts and genuinely concerned about family harmony, had handed over the video. What happened next was a masterpiece of digital manipulation and media exploitation that destroyed any remaining hope I had for reconciliation. Brenda took my raw, emotional video and subjected it to sophisticated editing. She altered the audio levels to make my voice sound more strained and unstable, added ominous background noise during key statements, and carefully spliced segments to change the context of my words. My earnest pleas for truth became paranoid delusions. My documented evidence became fabricated recordings, and my love for my son became emotional manipulation. Most devastatingly, she sold this heavily doctored video to a national gossip news channel as an exclusive story about elder mental health and family conflict. The segment was titled, "When Parents Attack a Mother's Desperate Lies Exposed," and it portrayed me as a textbook case of age-related paranoia and manipulative behavior. The edited video made me appear delusional and potentially dangerous. My carefully documented evidence was presented as the elaborate fantasy of a confused old woman who couldn't accept her family's reasonable decisions. The audio recordings of Carol's admissions were dismissed as either fabricated or taken out of context by someone experiencing cognitive decline. Dr. Amanda Peterson, a television psychologist who had never met me, provided expert commentary. What we're seeing here is a classic case of elder paranoia combined with narcissistic personality traits. The subject has created an elaborate fantasy to avoid accepting responsibility for her own actions and the natural consequences of family conflict. The national broadcast was devastating, but Mark's appearance on the program delivered the killing blow that shattered what remained of my heart. My son sat in the television studio, looking handsome and composed as he spoke about his deteriorating mother with practiced sorrow. He wore a dark suit and spoke in measured tones about the difficult decision to distance himself from someone he clearly loved but could no longer help. It's heartbreaking to watch someone you care about lose touch with reality. Mark said, his voice cracking with what appeared to be genuine emotion. My mother was once a respected professional, but age and stress have taken a terrible toll. The conspiracy theories, the accusations against family members, the inability to accept reasonable solutions, it's all symptomatic of someone who needs professional help, not legal battles. The interviewer nodded sympathetically. How do you maintain your love for someone while protecting yourself from their destructive behavior? You have to set boundaries, Mark replied. You have to accept that the person you once knew may be gone, replaced by someone who is no longer capable of healthy relationships. It's painful, but you can't let one person's mental health crisis destroy an entire family. Then he brought Ethan on camera, my 17-year-old grandson, looking appropriately somber as he spoke about his concern for my well-being and his hopes that I would get the help I needed. Every word was carefully chosen to reinforce the narrative of my mental instability while demonstrating their family's compassionate concern for my welfare. I love my grandmother, Ethan said with coached sincerity, but I've had to accept that the person making these accusations isn't really her anymore. We just want her to be safe and get better. Lisa appeared in a separate segment offering subtle nods of agreement and expressions of feigned sympathy that publicly reinforced Mark's narrative while positioning herself as the reasonable family member caught in an impossible situation. The program reached millions of viewers nationwide, cementing my reputation as a cautionary tale about the dangers of untreated mental illness in elderly family members. Comments on social media ranged from sympathy for my condition to praise for my family's mature handling of a difficult situation. I watched the broadcast from my hospital bed, feeling as though I was witnessing my own public execution. Every word I had spoken in love and desperation had been twisted into evidence of my instability. My son, the child I had carried for 9 months, nursed through fevers, cheered through graduations, was now publicly diagnosing me as mentally ill for a national audience. But even in my darkest moment of despair, help was coming from an unexpected source. Dr. Michael Chang, a retired forensic accountant who specialized in digital evidence analysis, had been watching the broadcast with professional interest. Something about the audio quality and editing style of my video message had caught his attention, subtle inconsistencies that suggested sophisticated manipulation. Dr. Chang contacted Judge Morrison, offering his services to analyze the digital evidence. His preliminary findings were shocking. The video had been edited at over 40 different points, with audio levels artificially adjusted, background noise, added post-production, and several segments spliced together from different recordings. This isn't just editing for time or clarity, Dr. Chang explained to my legal team. This is deliberate manipulation designed to change meaning and create false impressions. The original recording shows a coherent, credible witness presenting documented evidence. The broadcast version shows a confused, unstable person making paranoid accusations. More importantly, Dr. Chang's investigation into George's financial records had uncovered a pattern of sophisticated fraud that went back years, bad investments, gambling debts, and previous attempts to exploit elderly family members. The evidence painted a picture of exactly the kind of predatory behavior my mother had feared. As I lay in that hospital bed, reading Dr. Chang's preliminary report, I realized that my family's public betrayal had inadvertently provided the evidence I needed to expose their fraud. Their arrogance and greed had led them to create a documented trail of manipulation and deceit that could be used against them. They had stolen my voice and used it as a weapon against me, but in doing so, they had revealed the true nature of their conspiracy. The war was about to enter its final phase, and for the first time in months, I wasn't fighting alone. 6 months after my near-fatal collapse, I stood before the federal courthouse in downtown Philadelphia, surrounded by a legal team that would have been unimaginable during my darkest days. Mrs. Richardson's generous funding, combined with support from other former clients who had learned of my situation, had allowed me to hire the most formidable alliance imaginable, Judge Patricia Morrison, the retired Supreme Court Justice, Dr. Michael Chang, the forensic accountant, whose digital analysis had exposed Brenda's manipulation, and Robert Steinberg, an aggressive elder fraud attorney whose reputation for destroying inheritance scams was legendary. We were launching a massive federal civil and criminal lawsuit against Carol George Brenda Mark and Mr. Davies for fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, and defamation. The case had attracted national attention, with legal scholars calling it a landmark battle against sophisticated family financial abuse. News trucks lined the street outside the courthouse, and reporters from major networks had arrived to cover what they were calling the inheritance trial of the decade. But the media attention wasn't what mattered to me. What mattered was the small recording device I had carried in my purse for over a year, a digital voice recorder that had captured every conversation, every threat, every admission of fraud that had destroyed my family. You see, as an estate planner, I had learned long ago to document everything. During those early painful conversations with Carol and my children, when I still believed we could resolve our differences through honest discussion, I had recorded our meetings. I had documented Carol's desperate admissions, George's cynical calculations, and most heartbreakingly, Mark's willing participation in their conspiracy. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, with overflow seating arranged for the hundreds of people who had come to witness this reckoning. Cameras captured every moment as Judge Morrison stood to present our evidence. Her voice carried the authority of decades on the highest court in the land. Your Honor, she began addressing the federal judge presiding over the case. We are here today not just to seek justice for Mrs. Diane, but to expose a sophisticated conspiracy that represents everything wrong with how families can be destroyed by greed and manipulation. The first recording we played was devastating in its clarity. Carol's voice filled the silent courtroom recorded during one of our early conversations at my mother's house. Diane, you don't understand how desperate I am. Carol's voice echoed through the speakers. I owe $300,000, and those loan sharks aren't playing games. I told your mother I needed the money, and she said she'd take care of me. Whether she put it in writing or not doesn't matter. I'm taking what I need to survive. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, but Judge Morrison wasn't finished. The next recording featured George Carroll's cousin, speaking with chilling calculation about their strategy. Look, Diane's always been too rigid, too focused on rules and paperwork. George's voice revealed his true nature. Her mother was old and confused at the end. We can make a case that she promised Carol more than what's in the will. With Mark on our side, we can paint Diane as the greedy one who manipulated a dying woman. But it was the third recording that shattered my heart all over again, even though I had heard it dozens of times while preparing for this trial. It was Mark's voice, my own son, speaking with George about their plan to destroy my credibility. My mother's problem is that she thinks everyone else should follow the same rigid moral code she does, Mark said with casual cruelty. She doesn't understand that sometimes you have to be practical about money. If we can convince people she's having mental problems, we can get her out of the way and handle this inheritance the right way. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Reporters scribbled frantically, cameras captured every emotion on the faces of the defendants, and I watched as the public finally heard the truth I had been trying to tell for over a year. When Carol was called to testify, she attempted to maintain her facade of wounded dignity. But when confronted with her own recorded words, her carefully constructed persona began to crumble. Those recordings are taken out of context. She insisted, her voice rising with desperation. Diane manipulated me when I was vulnerable. She's trying to make my financial crisis sound like fraud when I was just fighting for what your mother promised me. But Mr. Steinberg was relentless. He played recording after recording, each one revealing Carol's increasing desperation and her willingness to say anything to justify her theft of my mother's legacy. By the time he was finished, Carol was visibly shaking her lies, exposed before the entire world. George's testimony was even more devastating. When confronted with his own voice, detailing his strategy to discredit me, he suffered a complete psychological collapse on the witness stand. The man who had orchestrated much of the campaign against me became incoherent, openly weeping and shaking uncontrollably as the magnitude of his fraud was laid bare. I needed the money, He sobbed, his composure completely shattered. I was desperate. I thought Diane would just give in if we pressured her enough. I never meant for it to go this far. Brenda attempted to flee the courtroom during George's breakdown, but she was apprehended by federal marshals. Her carefully crafted image as the concerned family member collapsed into desperate tears and utter disgrace as her role as the primary instigator was exposed for all to see. Mr. Davies, their lawyer, sat ashen-faced as the evidence mounted against him. His license to practice law would be revoked within the week, and criminal charges for conspiracy and professional misconduct would follow. But it was Mark's testimony that provided the most devastating and heartbreaking moment of the entire trial. When he was called to the witness stand and forced to listen to his own recorded words, something inside him finally broke. The confident, self-righteous man who had publicly diagnosed me as mentally ill on national television became a sobbing, broken figure. He listened to his own voice, dismissing his mother's suffering, heard himself agreeing to George's manipulation, witnessed his own willing participation in a conspiracy that had nearly killed me. I thought I was being smart. He whispered, tears streaming down his face. I thought I was securing my family's future. I convinced myself that Mom was being unreasonable, that she didn't understand how much we needed the money. I never stopped to think about what I was doing to her, what we were all doing to her. As I watched my son's complete breakdown on the witness stand, I felt no satisfaction, only profound sadness. This was the child I had raised, the boy I had loved unconditionally for 34 years. Seeing him destroyed by his own greed and poor choices was almost as painful as his betrayal had been. The trial lasted 3 weeks, but the verdict was never in doubt. The evidence was overwhelming, the recordings irrefutable, and the conspiracy so thoroughly documented that the defendants had no realistic defense. As Judge Morrison returned to her seat, she looked at me with the respect and vindication I had been denied for so long. "Mrs. Diane," she said, "your courage in fighting this battle has not only restored your own dignity, but has exposed a pattern of elder abuse that will help protect countless other families from similar fraud." The courtroom erupted in applause, but I sat quietly feeling the weight of a year-long nightmare finally lifting from my shoulders. I had been vindicated, my integrity restored, my mother's legacy protected. But as I looked at the broken figures of my family members, I realized that victory in court was only the beginning of a much longer healing process. The court's verdict was swift and decisive, delivered with a gravity that reflected the seriousness of the crimes committed against me and my mother's memory. Federal Judge Harrison, a stern man with silver hair and penetrating eyes, had heard enough evidence to understand the full scope of the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed my life. Carol received a sentence of 12 years in federal prison for elder fraud conspiracy and financial abuse. Her cousin George, as the primary architect of the scheme, was sentenced to 15 years. The judge noted that their actions represented a calculated assault on the fundamental trust that must exist within families and a predatory exploitation of grief and vulnerability. Brenda received 8 years and substantial financial penalties for her role in the psychological manipulation and media campaign that had branded me as mentally unstable. Mr. Davies faced disbarment and criminal charges that would likely keep him in prison for at least 5 years. But it was Mark's sentence that brought me the most complex emotions. My son received 4 years in federal prison for his complicity in the fraud and his active participation in the cover-up. As the judge pronounced his sentence, Mark looked at me across the courtroom with eyes full of shame and regret, mouthing the words, "I'm sorry," in a way that suggested he was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had done. The court also issued a formal judgment that went beyond the criminal convictions. Judge Harrison delivered a powerful statement that completely vindicated my character and dismantled the false narrative that had destroyed my reputation for over a year. Mrs. Diane represents the highest standards of professional integrity and personal courage, he declared. The evidence presented in this case demonstrates beyond any doubt that she was the victim of a sophisticated campaign of psychological manipulation and financial fraud. Her lifelong commitment to ethical principles and her unwavering dedication to protecting her mother's legacy stand in stark contrast to the greed and deception of those who attempted to destroy her. The judge's words restored not just my legal standing, but my sense of self-worth. After months of being branded as mentally unstable and morally corrupt, I was finally recognized for who I truly was, a woman who had fought courageously for truth and justice against overwhelming odds. The aftermath of the trial brought a mixture of vindication and profound sadness. My mother's estate was fully restored to me, along with substantial damages for the emotional distress and financial ruin I had endured. The house where I had cared for her in her final years was returned to me, along with the antique furniture that Carol had sold at her fraudulent auction. But the human cost of victory was enormous. George, imprisoned and financially ruined, sent me a rambling letter from federal prison that revealed the depths of his psychological collapse. In barely legible handwriting, he begged for forgiveness and financial assistance, unable to comprehend that his actions had consequences that extended far beyond immediate punishment. Diane, his letter read, "I know you must hate me, but I'm broken now. I lost everything, my family, my reputation, my freedom. I was desperate, and I made terrible choices. Please, if you have any compassion left, help me get through this. I'm your cousin. Family should mean something." I read his letter with profound sadness, recognizing the broken man who had once been a beloved family member. But his betrayal had been too complete, his cruelty too calculated for forgiveness to be possible. I kept his letter as a reminder of how greed can destroy even the strongest family bonds. Brenda's isolation was complete and devastating. Imprisoned and financially ruined, she was completely ostracized by the community that had once admired her sophistication and social skills. The woman who had orchestrated the media campaign against me now found herself the subject of articles about the dangers of manipulative family members and the sophisticated techniques used to destroy elderly relatives. Her former friends avoided her, her social media accounts were deactivated, and her attempts to maintain any public presence were met with ridicule and contempt. She had built her identity on her ability to control narratives and manipulate public opinion, and now she was powerless, consumed by the bitterness of her own failures. Mark's journey toward redemption began in the most unexpected way. 3 months after his sentencing, I received a letter from him that was unlike anything he had ever written to me before. It was raw, honest, and filled with a self-awareness that had been completely absent during the months of conflict. "Mom," he wrote from the federal correctional facility, "I know that saying I'm sorry isn't enough. I know that my actions caused you pain that I can never fully understand or repair. I've been in therapy here trying to understand how I became the kind of person who could betray the woman who gave me life and love for 34 years. His letter continued for several pages, detailing his growing understanding of how Brenda's manipulation had exploited his financial fears and his genuine love for his children. He acknowledged that his desperation to provide for Ethan and Chloe had blinded him to the cruelty of his actions, and the devastating impact they had on me. I convinced myself that you were being unreasonable, that you didn't understand our financial situation, he wrote. But the truth is that I was a coward who chose money over morality, convenience over courage. I turned my back on everything you taught me about right and wrong because it was easier than standing up to Brenda and George. Mark's letters became a regular part of my life, arriving every 2 weeks with updates on his therapy, his growing understanding of his actions, and his commitment to becoming the man he should have been all along. While I couldn't yet envision a full reconciliation, his genuine remorse and his determination to change gave me hope that someday we might rebuild some form of relationship based on truth and mutual respect. The greatest joy in the aftermath of the trial came from my daughter Lisa. She sought me out privately just days after the verdicts were announced, appearing at my door with tears streaming down her face and a humility I had never seen in her before. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking with emotion, "I am so ashamed of who I became during this nightmare. I let fear and confusion turn me into someone who abandoned the woman who deserved my loyalty and love more than anyone else in the world." Lisa's remorse was complete and devastating. She acknowledged her passive complicity in the campaign against me, her failure to investigate the truth for herself, and her willingness to believe lies about my character, rather than trust the woman who had raised her with love and integrity. "I was terrified that if I sided with you, I would lose Mark and the grandchildren," she admitted. "So I chose what I thought was the safe path, and in doing so, I nearly lost the most important person in my life. Can you ever forgive me?" Lisa's path to redemption was immediate and comprehensive. She became my steadfast advocate and companion, spending hours with me as we slowly rebuilt our relationship. She moved back to town to be closer to me, helped me restore Mom's house to its former beauty, and became the daughter I had always hoped she would be. Our conversations were deep and honest, covering not just the events of the past year, but our entire relationship as mother and daughter. We discussed ethical dilemmas, the complexities of human nature, and the importance of standing up for truth, even when it's difficult or costly. Ethan's healing was perhaps the most remarkable transformation of all. My 17-year-old grandson, deeply traumatized by his father's downfall and the revelation of his family's cruelty, underwent intensive therapy to process the complex emotions of shame, confusion, and grief. When he finally came to see me 6 months after the trial ended, he was a different young man than the one who had publicly mocked my professional books and dismissed my old-fashioned values. "Grandma," he said, his voice filled with mature understanding that seemed far beyond his years, "I need to understand what really happened to our family. I need to know who you really are, not the person they told me you were." Ethan and I spent countless hours together, and I shared stories of his father's childhood, his great-grandmother's values, and the principles that had guided our family for generations. He began to understand that the old-fashioned commitment to truth and integrity wasn't outdated, it was timeless. As I sat in my restored home one evening, surrounded by my mother's returned antiques and reading one of Mark's therapy letters, while Lisa prepared dinner in the kitchen, I realized that victory had come at an enormous cost, but had also brought unexpected gifts. My family was forever changed. George and Carol were broken by their own greed. Brenda had lost everything she valued. Mark was serving time for his betrayal, though he was working toward genuine redemption. But Lisa and Ethan had been restored to me, our relationships now built on honesty, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to the values that truly matter. The truth had liberated us all, though the price had been almost unbearably high. justice had been served, but more importantly, authentic love had been rediscovered. 2 years after the trial that changed everything, I stand in the kitchen of my restored home, sunlight streaming through windows that frame the garden my mother once loved. The house that had been stripped bare and sold to strangers has been returned to its former glory, filled once again with the antique furniture that carries 4 generations of family memories and the gentle sounds of genuine family life. Lisa arrives every Tuesday for our traditional dinner together, bringing fresh flowers from her garden and stories from her work as a victim's advocate, a career she chose after witnessing my struggle and wanting to help other families facing similar betrayals. Ethan visits every weekend now, a freshman at college, studying business ethics, inspired by his grandmother's unwavering commitment to principle over profit. My days are full of purpose and quiet contentment. The federal government has asked me to serve as a consultant on elder fraud prevention, and I travel occasionally to speak at conferences about the sophisticated techniques families use to exploit their elderly relatives. My story has become a cautionary tale, but also one of hope proof that even the most devastating betrayals can be overcome through courage and truth. The memoir I published 6 months ago, When Family Becomes the Enemy, An Estate Planner's Fight for Truth, has become a bestseller among seniors and family advocates. The book's success has allowed me to establish a foundation that provides legal assistance to elderly victims of family fraud, ensuring that other people in my situation won't face their battles alone. Mark's letters continue to arrive every 2 weeks, chronicling his slow but genuine transformation. He has 18 months left on his sentence, and while our relationship remains cautious and formal, his growth toward authentic remorse and self-awareness gives me hope that someday we might find a new foundation for love, one built on truth rather than the false harmony that nearly destroyed us both. Mom. His most recent letter read, "I've completed another semester of counseling, and I'm beginning to understand how profoundly I failed, not just as a son, but as a human being. I know that earning your forgiveness may take years, if it's even possible, but I want you to know that everything I'm learning about integrity and courage comes from remembering the woman who raised me. I'm trying to become worthy of being your son again." His words move me, though I remain realistic about the long journey ahead. Trust once shattered so completely takes time to rebuild. But his consistent effort and his growing understanding of the pain he caused give me hope that redemption is possible, even after the deepest betrayals. Lisa's transformation has been complete and beautiful. She lives 10 minutes away now and has become not just my daughter, but my closest friend and confidant. We spend hours discussing everything from family ethics to current events, and I've watched her develop into a woman of substance and moral courage that fills me with pride. I almost lost the most important relationship in my life because I was too afraid to trust my own judgment, she told me recently. Now I understand that standing up for truth isn't always comfortable, but it's always necessary. You taught me that, Mom, even when I was too afraid to listen. Ethan's relationship with me has become a source of pure joy. At 19, he possesses a maturity and moral clarity that seems remarkable for his age, forged in the fire of his family's crisis and his own journey toward understanding. He often brings his girlfriend to dinner, eager to share stories about his amazing grandmother, who fought the entire legal system and won. "You know what I tell people about you, Grandma," he said last Sunday as we worked together in the garden. "I tell them that you're proof that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. You could have given up, could have just accepted their lies about you, but you chose to fight for truth instead. That's the kind of person I want to be." The garden where we worked that afternoon has become a symbol of renewal for me. I've planted new roses alongside the ones my mother loved, creating a blend of old and new that mirrors my own life. The soil that was once neglected during my months of homelessness and desperation now blooms with vibrant color and promise. George remains in federal prison, his letters from the facility becoming increasingly infrequent and desperate. His last communication was a rambling plea for financial assistance that I didn't answer. Some wounds are too deep for healing, some betrayals too calculated for forgiveness. I feel sadness for the man he once was, but I cannot help the man he chose to become. Carol died in prison 8 months ago, her health destroyed by stress and the weight of her own guilt. I attended her funeral service, standing quietly in the back of the small chapel as her few remaining friends spoke about the woman they remembered before greed consumed her soul. I felt no satisfaction in her demise, only profound sadness that she had chosen a path that led to such a lonely, bitter end. Brenda was released from prison 6 months ago, but remains completely isolated, her reputation and social standing permanently destroyed. I occasionally see her at the grocery store, a shadow of the confident, manipulative woman who once orchestrated my public humiliation. We don't speak, but I sometimes catch her watching me with a mixture of envy and regret as I laugh with Lisa or embrace Ethan in the checkout line. My legal team has become like family to me. Judge Morrison, Dr. Chang, and Mr. Steinberg gather at my house every few months for what we call our justice dinner, sharing stories and supporting other cases of elder abuse. Their friendship and respect mean more to me than any financial settlement or legal victory. You know, Diane, Judge Morrison told me at our last gathering, your case changed how I think about family dynamics and elder rights. The courage you showed in fighting your own children and extended family has inspired legislation that will protect thousands of other seniors from similar abuse. As I prepare for bed each evening, in the house where my mother spent her final years, I feel a peace that I never thought possible during those dark months of betrayal and isolation. The woman who once slept on a cot in a homeless shelter now lies in her own comfortable bed, surrounded by restored family heirlooms and the knowledge that she stood up for truth when it mattered most. My mother's legacy has been protected and honored. Her values of integrity, courage, and principled living have been passed down to Ethan and are being slowly rediscovered by Mark. The inheritance she left was never really about money. It was about the moral foundation she built for her family, and that foundation remains strong despite the attempts to destroy it. I am 70 years old now, my hair completely gray, and my face marked by the trials I've endured. But I've never felt more beautiful or more purposeful than I do today. My life has meaning beyond anything I could have imagined during my career as an estate planner. I've learned that protecting families requires more than legal documents. It requires the courage to fight for truth, even when that truth is painful. The phone rings, interrupting my evening reflections. It's Lisa calling to say goodnight and to confirm our plans for tomorrow's dinner with Ethan. Her voice is warm with love and respect, and I'm reminded once again that the greatest victories are often the most personal ones. As I turn off the lights and head upstairs, I pass the framed photograph of my mother that holds the place of honor in my living room. She's smiling in her garden, surrounded by the roses that still bloom outside my window. "We did it, Mom," I whisper to her image. "We protected what mattered most." 4 years have passed since that devastating phone call from Carol changed my life forever. And as I sit in my sunlit kitchen this morning, watching Ethan help his girlfriend plant tomatoes in my garden, While Lisa prepares lunch nearby, I'm struck by how completely my world has been transformed. The woman who once slept in a homeless shelter, branded as mentally unstable by her own children, now lives in radiant peace in the home her mother loved. My days are filled with the gentle rhythms of authentic family relationships, meaningful work as an elder advocate, and the quiet satisfaction of a life lived according to unshakable principles. The house around me tells the story of recovery and renewal. My mother's antique furniture has been lovingly restored to its former beauty, each piece carrying memories that stretch back generations. The walls display photographs that chronicle not just our family's history, but the journey from betrayal to redemption that has defined these past years. Lisa's laughter drifts in from the kitchen as she shares a story about her work with abuse victims, her voice carrying the confidence and moral clarity of a woman who learned to choose truth over convenience. Ethan's voice joins hers as he describes his ethics course, the words of a young man who understands that integrity isn't old-fashioned, it's timeless. Mark's most recent letter sits on my desk, filled with updates about his final months in prison and his plans for rebuilding his life upon release. Our relationship remains cautious, built on his growing understanding of the pain he caused and my slowly healing willingness to hope for redemption. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not a destination, but a journey, one that requires genuine repentance on one side and extraordinary grace on the other. The greatest lesson of my ordeal has been this: self-worth cannot be stolen by others, only surrendered by ourselves. For months, I allowed my children's accusations and society's judgment to make me question my own integrity. I nearly lost myself in the maze of their lies and manipulation. But truth has a power that transcends human opinion, and principles provide a foundation that cannot be shaken by external storms. I've learned that true family is not defined by blood or legal relationships, but by shared values and genuine connection. Judge Morrison, Dr. Chang, and the other members of my legal team have become my chosen family, bound together by our commitment to justice and our respect for each other's character. Mrs. Richardson and my other former clients have shown me that professional relationships built on trust and ethical service can become sources of life-saving support when biological family fails. Most importantly, I've discovered that a life of purpose is always possible, regardless of age or circumstances. My work as an elder advocate has given new meaning to my expertise as an estate planner. The memoir that grew from my pain has become a beacon of hope for other seniors facing family betrayal. The foundation I established ensures that my suffering will prevent similar anguish for countless others. As I finish my morning coffee and prepare for another day of meaningful work, I feel a profound gratitude for the journey that brought me here. The betrayal nearly destroyed me, but it also revealed strengths I didn't know I possessed and led me to relationships I never could have imagined. To anyone facing similar battles to the lonely seniors who doubt their own worth when families turn against them, to the elderly victims of sophisticated financial abuse, I offer this promise: truth will ultimately prevail. Integrity can be reclaimed even after profound deception, and a life of authentic connection and purposeful service is always possible. The spirit of resilience and an unwavering moral compass can triumph over even the most ruthless greed. Justice may be delayed, but it cannot be denied. And sometimes the most devastating betrayals become the foundation for the most beautiful redemptions. I am Diane, and at 70 years old, I am finally completely radiantly free.